Hey everybody, Tony D and Little Joan here on a Hollywoke hot take. Yeah, I wasn't going to do one, but there's not a lot of great movie trailers out. I looked at one called Mr. Corman. I actually shot it. I don't know if I'm even going to post it. It just angers and confuses me, the trailer. Anyhow, Quentin Tarantino. I would far rather people watch movies for free on YouTube than give another dime to Amazon or Apple. And he's basically talking about people who love movies. I read this in my news blast, and then I was like, oh, let me take a look at it. So I read the article. Yeah, I mean, the thing is, YouTube is only sort of generous because, I mean, it was kind of set up not to make money. It's one of those companies that really doesn't make money. And that's part of the problem with it now. It's part of the reason everything seems to be shrinking and getting demonetized. It can't sustain its model, is my understanding, economically. So it's like everything on YouTube is sort of on borrowed time in a weird way. But they do have this cool channel that Tarantino mentioned called Pizza Flicks. And these are just old, expired movies. These are the kind of movies you would see if you went to... they used to have a secret cinema in Philadelphia. I think they still have it. I'm on the list. I haven't seen a post for it for a while. And you would go and you would see out-of-print films about Philadelphia, and the guy who ran it was a film archivist, and he had all sorts of crazy movies that they don't show anymore, like the racist Looney Tunes, the really racist one. And you could see, here's a Matt Fleischer cartoon. I mean, there's all sorts of stuff. It's just out of print, and they don't show them anymore because either nobody wants to see them, or it's like the copyrights have expired and the movie companies just don't care. So, guys who really love film, they're trying to preserve these. Not because they're necessarily all that important, although they're Vincent Price. There's a Vincent Price movie right there. That's kind of cool. A Lugosi movie. I mean, you don't know where things will be 100 years from now with this stuff. This could be the only copies left of these movies. So, history is important. History is important. And unfortunately, it's not important to the guys in the current movie industry, with somewhat of a good reason, but it would be cool if they kept all this stuff. Checking over at Breitbart, Marsha Blackburn. Taylor Swift could be the first victim of Marxism, socialistic government. This is Senator Marsha Blackburn. Says that if socialists win and implement Marxism in government, the first victim of the new leftist society would be creative community leaders like country-turned-pop star Taylor Swift. Yeah, that's basically true. I mean, probably it would go rich people first. The visible ones who weren't towing the party line. And even the people in the Democratic Party who are rich wouldn't toe the Marxism line until they realized, ooh, I'm not going to be able to keep anything unless I become a total Marxist. Then they'll jump right on board that ship, but it's probably going to be too late for them. And this is the problem with communism, Marxism, socialism, whatever you want to call it, is they go after the richest people first, and they just grind them down, and they take their money, and they discredit them, and they destroy them. And then when that person's done, they go to the next richest person, and the next one, and the next one, and the next one, and the next one. And the only people who have power are people, they have some money, but they have more influence than anything else. They're the leaders of the mob. So it certainly would be that Taylor Swift, they would eventually get to her. I kind of think a lot of other stuff would collapse long before they got to Taylor Swift. She probably wouldn't even be famous by that point. It would be, she would be by the wayside, and she'd just be another rich white woman that they'd come to get your money. But the government would just seize money. They would just seize the wealth or just tax you endlessly. The problem with that too is before that gets really bad, all the rich people would leave, and even when it got bad, rich people would leave. They have the means, they have the money. They'll just bribe some people, slip into Canada, and then from there, get a fake ID, go wherever you want. I mean, that's the reason money buys you certain things. It buys you whatever. I mean, if you can convert all your money to something that you could carry around, whether it's electronic or whatever, who's going to stop you? They'll have to trace you. They have to really go after you. And while they're going after somebody else, you slip out of the country and, I don't know, move to Costa Rica with your millions and live out your days going, oh, United States, what a mess that place is now. And that's probably what Taylor Swift would do, I would imagine. A lot of these celebrities would just leave. They would just leave the country and go somewhere else where it wasn't this bad. But if the United States falls, where would be your safe haven? I mean, I used to think Canada, but my God, Canada's 1,000 times worse than us. Maybe the UK, maybe, simply because it's an island and they did manage to Brexit themselves, but you'd be slightly better for slightly different reasons. Maybe in a wild place like, Bangkok or Philippines or something like that, where they're just, no one's gotten around to taking over those places because they're not all that concerned. But, if the United States went socialist, I mean, the Chinese would just start rolling into places like that. So there'd really be no place to hide. Australia's a mess. New Zealand's a mess. Japan's right in the crosshairs. I mean, it's really no place to hide. Prolific Batman writer Chuck Dixon explains why manga is wiping the floor with American comics. Yeah, I mean, basically he just says, there's a real craft to manga, and they're putting a lot of passion into it, and it's just not there with the big two. Now that's always been true, I think, for a lot of years, simply because corporate comics suck for the most part. Occasionally they do good work when they're not as corporate, when they don't act like corporate behemoths. But for a lot of years, before the companies got bought, they were independent, and their primary focus was building readership, building comics. And then they got bought, and then they were in this window of time where they didn't have to have sales, and slowly they got corrupted by that. That was even during the time of Chuck Dixon. I mean, that's not to denigrate his work. I thought his work was pretty good, although towards the end I think he got very, very same with a lot of his books. I thought he was writing too many books at one point. At one point he was writing like Batman, The Punisher, Deathstroke. I remember one month, like his 6 books came out of his, and I was like, man, he's writing too many things. And they all kind of sounded similar. But I mean, he was the Tom Clancy of comics, so his style was similar. I'm sure if I wrote that many comics, my stuff would start to bleed into each other. But he was a great writer, but they would never hire him now. He's way too normal for the people running Marvel, and probably the people running DC too. And I think it's mainly that. I mean, it's mainly the wokeness that has destroyed comics. It destroys creativity because they're so obsessed with race. I mean, the manga stuff is not obsessed with race. No, they're just crazy stories, crazy comic book stories. Marvel and DC can't stop talking about race and other stuff, adjacent topics to that as well. Here's former Marvel editor-in-chief Jim Shooter ripping modern Marvel comics. And Jim was very old school. I met him once. He was a nice guy. He was very nice to me. And, he was in the heyday of comics, man. He was really... Look, I don't want to diss Joe Quesada, but I think he was the last great editor at Marvel. Quesada did okay. I wouldn't call him great. Shooter was great because Shooter came up with the crossover. He did these big events and they worked. And look, he certainly had his shortcomings. comics with a few things, and when he launched his comic book companies, plural. But you know, he was a visionary. He really was. Joe Quesada to me wasn't a visionary. He had some okay ideas, but he didn't have a vision for Marvel. It never stood out after Shooter left. That was the end of, that was, to me, that's the peak. Jim Shooter was the peak of Marvel Comics. But that's just my opinion. So, but yeah, many would argue, let's see, does he have anything specific to say? We comic savvy types know that the female characters dressed like the Black Widow and had reddish hair. I'm not sure it's her, though. She doesn't look like Black Widow. I remember facially or any other way, doesn't have the figure, and her head is too big. Her girlish figure and proportionally large head caused me to suspect that maybe she's supposed to be a young girl, a very young Black Widow maybe, but the drawing is pretty bad. Hard to tell what the artist meant for the character to look young. It's just bad draftsmanship. Look at her face and her head, distorted, poorly constructed, extra cartoony. Yeah, he's ripping into the art there. Yeah, I'm not doing a deep dive into this. I'm sick of comics, quite frankly. I miss Shooter. I would, you know, if Shooter got to be the head of Marvel Comics again, I'd probably go back and start reading them again. But, you know, he's a guy who would hire Chuck Dixon. So that's never going to happen. Not in this era. Marvel Studios executives promise more LGBTQ representation in coming projects. Nobody asked for that, but okay. Keep burning down Disney, I guess. Can Olympics without fans still be a must-see TV? I don't know. For me, it was never must-see TV. I think this is just going to be depressing and sad. They're going to have to like constantly not show the stands. It's sad. Who the hell wants to see that? You want to hear people cheering and going, "Oh," you know, when something horrible happens. It's stupid. I don't know why they're deciding to ruin the Olympics. Again, unless the plan is they need to break the worldwide economy, throw us into a depression so they can remake the entire world and say, ha-ha, now everybody has to answer to us if they want to eat, live, sleep, work. We control it all. And step out of line, we take away the food. We kick you out of your place. The Great Reset, everybody. Maybe. So far, the United States is resistant to that, but we'll see how long it lasts. Winter is a-coming. Gas prices spiked 40% under Biden. These Hollywood celebrities are pushing him to shut down more pipelines. Yeah, the guys who don't depend on gasoline for anything. The guys who could pay a $20 a gallon. It wouldn't make a difference to Leonardo DiCaprio. What would he care? Who's that? I can't even recognize that. Is that Kate Perry? Looks like her. Ed Helms. That's sad. Joaquin Phoenix, of course. Amy Schumer. God. Danny Glover. Disappointing. Mark Ruffalo, of course. Jane Fonda, of course. And Sarah Silverman, now with glasses, of course. It's the smart Sarah Silverman. Oh, she has glasses. She's very intelligent. They want to shut down the Enbridge Line 3 oil sands pipeline, as well as the fossil fuel infrastructure expansion, claiming it represents an attack on the climate and indigenous rights. Look, you're going to kill more people by doing this. You just don't get how things work. You don't care. You just are pushing your virtue signaling nonsense. If you learned how this worked, you wouldn't support this. You've hurt the economy. You failed to see the downstream effects of what you're doing. It's one, look, I'm for green energy, but not to suddenly rip out the old stuff and say, well, find some better energy. That's not what you do. You find the green energy and then go, okay, it's now equal or better than the fossil fuel. Let's now switch over. That's what you do. You don't say, shut down all the fossil fuels. That's the only way we can incentivize it. During that transition, you'll kill people. They'll die. They'll actually die because your fuel is for everything right now. And they're not going to stop in China and India. All those people want a middle class lifestyle like most Americans have. They dream of that. They dream of having a house and a car like me and just being able to drive to the store whenever they want and go to their job and go to the movies and just have an easy life. That's what they dream of. They don't have that now, but they're going to have it. And if the United States goes back to an agrarian economy where everybody has to grow their own food and we're digging in the dirt with our bare hands and we have no industry, they'll still do it. And they'll run us over in the process. And they won't think twice about it. They'll say, oh, the Americans, what did they do to themselves? These people don't understand that because they're way too insulated. And they, of course, wouldn't be affected. And they'll never take responsibility for the changes that they're pushing. You know, they'll never stand back and say, oh, I pushed for this and it was a disaster. I'm sorry. They'll never do that. They'll just say, well, you know, it would have worked except X, Y, Z. Fortunately, I think Biden is so out of touch. You know, see, look at this. Over 200 actors, musicians, environmentalists, Democratic donors. Democratic donors. Yeah, they're so wonderful, those Democratic donors. An allied activist call on President Biden to stop line 3. No. Jane Seymour Fonda. She used to be reviled. Now she's held up as a kind of an old school hippie. But I, for one, am against this. And these stars, well, they're not going to have much to do in the coming years because people are tuning out to them and they don't care anymore. They don't care anymore. They're reaching the point where they don't care what it costs. They will not support these people. And guess what? I don't support them. And I love movies. I love TV. But I won't support people that hate me or are so deeply ignorant they can't do the basic math on economics to discover that, well, maybe shutting down a pipeline that brings fossil fuels to millions of people might have an impact, a negative impact on people. I mean, you could just invest your money into green energy and move things forward there, and then we'd switch over. As soon as it was cheaper or more efficient or whatever. You know, we used to worry about, my God, the electric car, they killed it, oh no. Now nobody cares about that. Nobody cares about that amazingly efficient car that allegedly was. Although now, looking back on it, I think probably the documentary they made about it might have been a little sus. Now that I know everything, now that I know more things, I should say, about how just deeply corrupt our media is. And again, these guys are corrupt, right? They're just going to keep pushing this line because, you know, the moment they stop doing it, they're not going to get a phone call, right? Who's going to put these guys in movies and TV shows if they suddenly decide to support Trump? Look at Chris Pratt. He's under the gun constantly, and he hasn't even announced his politics. Even though most people surmise he's probably Republican. Probably when he's like 50, 60, he'll be like James Woods. He'll come out and then he'll be talking trash on Twitter, and it'll be hilarious. Tomorrow War director, speaking of Chris Pratt, Chris McKay says Nightwing solo film is still a movie I really want to do. Well, maybe you should get a better screenwriter because that Tomorrow War was a train wreck of a screenplay. As much as I support Pratt and wanted that movie to be good, and look, he was good in it. That was the only reason I could even sit through the damn thing. He made it entertaining because he's a charismatic guy. He's fun to watch, and you know, even when he's delivering stupid dialogue or doing stupid things that make no sense within the context of the movie, you were like, well, it's fun at least. But you know, Nightwing solo film, I don't know how you're gonna explain it. I guess if you know, it'll be another not Batman movie. It'll be not Batman movie number 5 or 6, or not Batman project number 5 or 6. I'm surprised they've waited this long to do Nightwing, quite frankly. Ashton Kutcher warns that China could use TikTok to influence the minds of Americans and push anti-propaganda. Could? Where the hell have you been? Try like is. Try like right now. Thanks for getting on board, though, bro. Better late than never. So, I mean, he hasn't been in stuff in a while. So, at least you're taking a side that I could get on board with. I always thought he was funny on That 70s Show. I mean, I thought Kelso was hilarious, let's be honest. It was weird he married Demi Moore. That was just weird. That was a whole, like, cougar thing. Like, it's very strange. But, I mean, if you were going to marry somebody for your career, I mean, a whole lot less hotter women than Demi Moore. God bless him. Now he's hooked up with Mila Kunis. Just as hot, like a younger version of Demi Moore. So, the guy's doing okay for himself. But good. I'm glad somebody's saying it. Spread the word. Delta variant cases identified in California rise 71% over the past week. COVID test positivity rate up 50% for second week in a row. Is this CNN? Oh, it's Deadline. Once again, Deadline jumping back into, well, I would call it politics. You know, and now talking about California Governor Gavin Newsom, again, kind of positively, which, you know, what happened to the recall? Why aren't these guys behind the recall? Oh, right, he's a Democrat. I bet if he was a Republican, they wouldn't stop talking about it. Maybe get rid of Gavin Newsom, and your problems would be mostly solved. Last week, there were 634 Delta cases identified in California. The total released today is 1,085. That's in California. California is a big state with millions of people in it. That's kind of a low amount. And again, this is how they changed the numbers, right? So if you say that's another like 300 and some cases in California, all of California, it doesn't sound like much. But when you say it's up 71%, oh, well, that sounds much higher, because there's only 100%, right? That's the top. COVID test positivity rate up 50%. Yeah, if you go from, you know, 3 or 4 to 6, that's technically up 50%. That wasn't the number for that. I don't know what the number is that. But this is the way they played with the numbers in New Jersey. I assume they definitely would do it in California. Why? I don't know. Are the pharmaceutical companies not rich enough for you people? Do they own the Democrats that hard? I suspect they do. I know they apparently have a lot of money in one of my senators here in New Jersey. San Francisco gay men's chorus hides will convert your children video after backlash. Good. At least they hit it. Again, LGBTQ guys, you should be the backlash. You should take these guys aside and say, what the F are you doing? This does not represent us. We do not want this message. Have you not been paying attention? And in their defense, these are the younger gay guys. They don't remember the 80s. They probably weren't even alive. Back in the 80s, this is exactly what the Republicans accused the gay community of. They would say, oh, this is the gay agenda. It's the gay agenda. They're going to convert the kids. This is exactly why Republicans tried to ban gay people from teaching. And then you go and sing about it? Stupid move. Horrific optics. And quite frankly, now you've got a guy in your chorus who's had some trouble in that area, so clean your house. Black Widow star Scarlett Johansson claims women are undermined, undeserved, underappreciated, underpaid. Yeah, that's weird. It's so weird you say that now. You know, when you were a hot piece and everybody was tripping all over themselves, they hand you money and success and fame and jewelry and whatever else you got. Black Widow star and highest paid actress in the world for the past 2 years, Scarlett Johansson recently claimed women are undermined, undeserved, underappreciated, and underpaid. The highest paid actress for 2 years in a row. Oh, but she's oppressed. God. You know? The wokeness really is unattractive, ScarJo. I gotta say. You were one of my favorites, and reading this just makes me go, nah. Nah. This happens to me all the time on the dating sites. I see some hot girl, and I'm like, oh, she's cute. And I start reading her bio, and then she goes on and on about some woke nonsense, and I go, ooh, swipe left. I don't even think she believes it, quite frankly. I think she's just going along. I think this is part of her PR. She thinks it's going to do her some good. I'm not going to see her movie now. I mean, before I was kind of on the fence. Mostly no, admittedly, but now I refuse to see her movie. Nolte, John Nolte, alleged Bruce Lee letters documents shipments of illegal narcotics. A trove of handwritten letters apparently written by Bruce Lee reveals that the Kung Fu superstar, oh, it says King Fu superstar, I think you mean Kung Fu superstar, was heavily involved in illegal drugs and frequently requested they be shipped illegally to him in Hong Kong. That's crazy. What kind of narcotics? Oh, cocaine was sent to him by mail. Oh, you made it sound like heroin, but that's crazy. Well, he was a movie star. I mean, it was the 70s. But still, you know, this goes back to the recent thing about, oh, you know, Quentin Tarantino dared to criticize Bruce Lee in his movie, and his daughter got all bent out of shape. Which, again, he understood. I understand that, too. But for other people to get outraged on Lee's behalf, I mean, that's weird. Look, nobody's above criticism. It was a fun way to show Bruce Lee. I mean, the fact that he was even in it at all. I mean, you know, Quentin Tarantino didn't have to put a Bruce Lee tribute in his movie at all. Could have put in somebody else. It was a scene where, you know, I like to do that with historical figures, but most of the ones I use have been dead for hundreds of years. So, hang on, Joan. I got one more story, Joan. Finally, how much is too much? Disney continues to nickel and dime park guests. Well, I think this is what happens when a corporation really takes over. I think for a lot of years, the Disney family was at least had their hand in things, and then I think that carried over to the corporation for a long time, but now it's getting very corporate and I guess very tight. They are looking to squeeze out some money here. And I think they've been through this phase before. Attendees can now expect to pay $109 for a single day, one-day pass, $45 for a day of parking. Oh my God. And other costs such as transportation, hotels, meals, cinema blend continues. Joe, you're being very rude. I'm on the last story. Come here. All right, sit here. Shut up. Fans of both Disneyland and Disney World are getting to see just what will happen when some sort of a replacement for Fast Pass arrives. On one hand, nobody is necessarily all that excited to pay more for a Disney vacation. It's not like it's cheap to begin with. At the same time, there's a general feeling that Fast Pass at Disney World simply didn't work. The necessity of having every single ride in the park use the system resulted in a much longer standby queues than many rides would have normally had. A paid option, especially if it only works on certain rides, might be preferable. If Disney were alive today, you'd probably be uncomfortable with the prices they're charging right now. Scott Smith, an assistant professor of hospitality in the University of South Carolina, who worked as a cast member at Disney's Haunted Mansion, tells the Washington Post, they've priced middle-class families out. And the price increases might not stop there. There'll be new attractions, entertainment, dining, merchandise, and more. Yeah, I thought it was high-priced even before this. I mean, even when I went, I guess it was in the 90s or late 80s my family went. I don't remember. I thought it was high then, you know? Back when arcades were still a thing. God, I guess it was the 80s. And, geez, They just charged it for everything, and now I can't imagine. I mean, you're talking hundreds of dollars a day just for the food. You know, the food. So I don't know. It's just I'd rather go to Great Adventure maybe if I'm going to a park because that's local. I don't have to stay there. Go on some rides. Clementon Park for you local Pineys in South Jersey. But you know, people love Disney World. I guess I don't know. You know, for people around the world, I sort of get it. For the locals, you're a bunch of tourists, I'd say. That's it for me. Little Joan and I are going to go clean up from dinner, and we'll see you tomorrow.